The day before my daughter's wedding, I watched a storm dress itself as sunlight. We were at the Whitmore Hotel in downtown Atlanta, on the 31st floor where the windows pretended the city was something you could cradle in your palms. Magnolia arrangements leaned against gold mirrors, napkins folded like small birds, and a crystal chandelier scattered prisms that climbed the walls and settled on people's cheekbones. My daughter, Nia, floated from table to table in a silk robe and house slippers, pinky raised around a flute of ginger ale. She has my smile but her father's elbows, angular and sure, as if she was born to gesture at futures. Her fiancé, Carter, carried the glow of a man accustomed to doors, opening before his knuckles reached them. He was the kind of handsome that photographs remember, with cheekbones you could hang a coat on and a voice smooth as velvet ribbon being pulled from a box. He found me in a hallway, lined with black and white portraits of famous guests, each face frozen in the act of pretending time doesn't exist. He asked, with that polite lilt. If we could speak without the orchestra of bridesmaids in earshot. I followed him to the service corridor, where the carpet thinned into concrete and the air smelled of lemons and secrets. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Ms. Rhodes, he said, and my last name sounded like a stain he'd been trying to scrub out. You've been very present. Nia and I need a clean start. The perfect gift would be your absence. From the planning, from the home, from our lives. For a heartbeat, even the building held its breath. I stared at a blinking red fire alarm and counted to 10. A habit learned from raising a daughter through the tempests of adolescence and the uncertain peace afterward. I thought of all the ways Black women swallow their heat so the world doesn't choke. And I swallowed mine. If I disappear, I said, words folded carefully, to be certain you know what voids invite. He smiled the way men smile when they think they've taught you something. A quiet one, he said, and his cologne reached for me like a hand. I've been many things in this life: Sunday school alto, nursing assistant, bakery cashier, literature student who left college to pay rent, then local radio voice fiercely known between midnight and 4 a.m. as the midnight siren. Mother has been the only name. I never tried to hang back on the rack. For 25 years I'd loved Nia the way sunlight loves the side of a house. Every day I arrived, whether anyone noticed or not. And yet, standing in that corridor, I understood a strange truth. Sometimes the only way to be the mother your child needs is to disappear on purpose. Not to abandon, but to allow daylight to flood a room where shadows were pretending to be furniture. I nodded, as if he'd handed me a grocery list. And the night kept moving. I drove home under a sky that felt like slate and promise. My condo smelled faintly of sage from the morning I'd burned a bundle, whispering to the corners that they could release whatever had taken lodging there. Every shelf in my living room tells a story. In the far corner, a framed poster from my first night on air, the red on-air bulb captured in the shot like a blood orange against the dark. On the coffee table, a fan letter from a woman who said my voice kept her from stepping off the wrong ledge of a midnight. On the mantel, a photograph of 12-year-old Nia in a choir robe, mouth open wide, believing her small body could build a ladder to heaven. I made tea and sat on the floor with a legal pad while the kettle's last sigh found its way into the tiles. If I was going to disappear, it needed to be surgical, not theatrical. Carter's mistake was thinking my silence would be a hallway he could walk without consequence. What he didn't understand is that apology and proof live closer than breath on a mirror. And I had breath. For months my antennae had hummed. Not because I'm prone to distrust, but because I've spent enough nights at a radio station answering calls from women black, brown, white who mistook control for care. Men calling from block numbers to ask if I could play something that would make her remember. As if a song could obligate a heart. I listened for patterns. I archive tone. I keep stories in a ledger of the body. Carter loved in spreadsheets. He tracked Nia's calendar, her meals, her miles. He called it optimization. I called it the slow choke. The first time he corrected her in public, he did it with a joke. The second time, he offered to fix her resume. The third time, he said her laugh was a touch loud. And the fourth time was when I started saving things. The text messages he sent her for her own good. The emails to relatives, explaining why access to the guest list should go through him. A voice memo of him on speakerphone one afternoon, when he told my daughter that marriage works better when wives face the same direction as their husbands. I have never been a courtroom, but that night, I assembled an exhibit. I called my producer at the station, an old head named Dwayne who's seen enough to walk calmly through a thunderstorm. I told him I needed a special segment ready to run, scheduled into our automation system. One that would stream privately to a page only accessible through a QR code, and would go live at exactly 6:47 p.m. The next evening, he didn't ask why. Dwayne knows my voice has architecture behind it when it lowers. You bring the roof? He said. I'll bring the lightning rod. When the tea cooled, I recorded. I sat in my pantry with quilts tacked around me for sound. And I spoke to a future that was already rolling downhill. I told a story about a city of glass where men taught women to fear their reflections until the only mirror they trusted was the man's face. I layered in music like Pulse. And between my words I braided the receipts clipped audio from a podcast where Carter bragged about the psychology of compliance. A woman's voicemail to my show that came 6 months ago about an investor who charmed her church group, then disappeared with their money. She never said his name on air. She said it on the call to me. And the small, shaking audio of my daughter apologizing to me for missing Sunday dinner because Carter thinks I need to align my priorities. I didn't include furry. I didn't need to. I included truth. Then I wrote a letter to my child. It was 2 pages long and written like a lighthouse. Not a verdict. I told her what love had done to me when it was wrong and what it taught me when it was right. I told her that a woman's laugh is a map, and that any man who tries to redraw it without her hand on the pen is not building a life. He's building a prison with better drapes. I told her I was disappearing for a day, maybe 2. Not because she had chosen a man over me, but because I wanted her to hear her own footsteps without my shadow walking beside them. I put that letter into an envelope, the color of sunrise, and slid it under her apartment door at 3 a.m, and then texted her that I loved her, and to check the floor before she checked the mirror. After that, I packed a bag and drove to my aunt's shotgun house in Cabbagetown, where the walls smell like cornbread and cigarettes, and the saints she keeps aligned on the windowsill. Aunt Vi answered in a headscarf and a t-shirt with the word hush in glitter. She let me in like it was late summer, and I was a 10-year-old with skinned knees. She made room in the guest room without asking which of my ghosts needed extra blankets. Then held my face in both hands and kissed my forehead. The Lord likes truth more than spectacle, she said, and went back to bed. Morning broke like a promise that had been kept a long time ago. The city was all brass and glass and bus brake squeals. People in black athleisure with coffee. A man on a corner selling flowers from a clean white bucket. I walked to the station under a sky, the color of a communion dress, and stepped into the lobby, where a security guard raised his chin at me, like we were in a conspiracy. The whole day moved like one long inhale. I checked the automation again and again. Touched the waveform on Dwayne's screen like it might shift under my finger. I didn't text my daughter. I didn't call. Disappearing is a discipline. By late afternoon, the Whitmore had become an orchard of satin. I did not dress in mother of the bride finery. I wore black slacks, a blouse, the color of the inside of a plum, and flats. I pinned my hair up high and slick, so my face was bare to the world, because I wanted no softness to be mistaken for indecision. I arrived at the hotel through the catering entrance, nodded to men balancing towers of plates, and slipped up the service elevator to the mezzanine. From there, I could see everything through a wall of tempered glass, the arch made of baby's breath and orchids. The aisle rolled out like a future. The string quartet with bows raised. The groom waiting, immaculate. My daughter standing with my brother, luminous and steady, holding his arm like a lighthouse, balances the dark. The ceremony was beautiful in the way most ceremonies are, words burnished by tradition, the air trembling with nerves. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, I did not interrupt. I have interrupted 100 midnight callers. I have spoken through tears and into them. It was not time to speak. It was time to trust the seed I'd planted to split its own husk. They kissed, and the room clapped. It felt like a thunderclap wrapped in lace. I did not attend the receiving line. I took the service stairs down, and crossed into the Thai restaurant next door, where the owner, a quiet woman named Ploy, who keeps basil in vases like flowers, saved me a corner booth. I watched the Whitmore's ballroom through the window's reflection and held my phone on the table like a small, expectant bird. They did the first dance. They cut the cake. They toasted. It was 6:43 when I sent the text to the bandleader, a kid named Jax. I'd mentored through a bad patch 2 years ago. Now, at 6:45, the Wi-Fi network, named For Love, only went live. At 6:60, the QR code, printed elegantly on each table's place card. A code I had somehow convinced the planner to include as interactive song requests for the happy couple, opened to a page with a single button. It read, simply, play. The first thing they heard was a heartbeat. My mother's kitchen clock sampled and looped until it became something the body understands before it translates. Then my voice, intimate as breath in the space between two ribs. Good evening, I said. You don't know me, but you know a woman who laughs like an open window. Somewhere between the salad and the salmon. A hush took the room by the throat. Phones tilted up in little constellations. The chandelier threw rainbows onto wrists that suddenly felt like wrists and not chandeliers. I didn't name anyone. I told the story about the city of glass and the man who collected mirrors. Then I played the audio of Carter saying, in a podcast recorded 9 months ago, the trick is to get them to think compliance is kindness. I let my voiceover ride gently on top. Language is a house. Notice who's in charge of the doors. I played the voicemail from the woman whose church group had been persuaded to invest in a startup promising ethical influence, a startup registered under Carter's former LLC, which I filed documents for on a thumb drive with a timestamp and a notary seal. I played the simple sentence my daughter had once whispered into my neck when she thought I was asleep. I'm so tired of asking permission to be myself. No one needed names to feel the shape of this thing. People know the geometry of harm, even when they pretend to be strangers to it. The room did not erupt. It melted. Voices slipped into a low tide of murmurs, then dropped away altogether, as if the building remembered it had always been made of quiet. Across the glass, I saw women look at each other with faces that said, I remember. I saw men look at their hands like they had never been hands before. I saw the groom freeze, then laugh, then turn his laugh into a scoff, then scan for an exit. He glanced up toward the mezzanine and didn't find me. I wasn't where he left me. That matters more than anything. I watched my daughter. Her face did not change at first. Then it did the strangest, bravest thing. It opened. You can't practice that. You can only recognize it. She set down her champagne without looking away from nothing in particular, and put her palm over her heart like someone listening through a wall. When the track ended, my voice did not tell anyone what to do. I had already done the only thing a mother can do after the light reveals dust. I had switched the lamp on and moved my hand. I didn't see the rest through glass because I finally stood up. I walked into it. The air in the ballroom felt like rain right before it commits. Carter moved toward my daughter. Lips curved into that sculpted empathy men practice in the mirror. I arrived at my child's shoulder with the gravity of a tree. I did not speak to him. I spoke into the space my daughter and I have always shared. There is a letter for you at home, I said. If you want to read it now, my car is out back. She didn't look at him. She looked at me with a gaze that traveled 25 years and arrived in the body age had given it. Then she took off her shoes and carried them. There's a sound when a room exhales. We walked through it. No slamming doors. No declarations. Just feet on carpet and then on concrete and then on the street as the sky decided to become evening. We didn't speak in the car. The city did the talking. Neon and bus lights and a saxophone somewhere. We couldn't place. At her apartment, she found the envelope and sat cross-legged on the rug like a child preparing to assemble something. She read without moving her mouth. And then she did cry. Not the keening of grief, but the letting go cry that cleans out corners. She thanked me without words, and then with them. She told me the ways control had crept in, how it felt like safety until it didn't. She confessed how slowly she had stopped asking herself questions, because his answers arrived so quickly dressed in certainty. We do not always know the line between comfort and erasure, until our own reflection blurs. That night, Nia slept at my aunt's house with me. Aunt Vi made tea in the rosiest cups and set biscuits on a plate like peace treaties. In the morning, sunlight found its way down the throat of the hallway and through a rectangle across the guest bed, right onto my daughter's face. She woke up laughing because the world had the audacity to keep being beautiful. She called the Whitmore. She arranged to return the dress and ask the hotel to donate the food. She would deal with the annulment quietly. She texted Carter to inform him that there would be no more conversations, and she blocked the number. She washed her hair herself, slowly, and the steam fogged the bathroom mirror until neither of us had to see our faces. Later, in my small station with the posters and the plant, I always forget to water. I opened the phone lines and spoke into the dark that has always been my congregation. I told them a story about the difference between silence and disappearance. I played music that sounded like decisions. The board lit up like rain on a windshield. People told me about the moment they left, about the moments they didn't, and wish they had. Men called to say they recognized themselves in a mirror they didn't know had been hung up for them. I walked out of that shift carrying a sack of strangers' trust and feeling the weight like purpose. News travels through a city the way perfume does. It shouldn't be there, but it is. I heard, because people tell me things, that Carter triaged his losses as if they were quarterly reports. He wrote statements. He smiled in interviews about misinterpretations. But there are rooms that don't let you back in. Once a certain kind of truth sits down and stays. I saw him once months later, on Peachtree, his name floating above him like a ghost. He couldn't convince anyone to ignore. He didn't see me. That was the exact portion of my life I wanted him to have. Nia moved through grief the way a river rounds a boulder, not by fighting it, but by making a new path. She returned to her design job and negotiated her salary up with a steadiness that forced the room to recalibrate. She took a boxing class and learned what it feels like to be unafraid of her own fists. She started humming again when she cooked. Seeing her do small things with unadorned joy felt like watching a house open windows in spring. We did not become saints in the process. We argued about closet space when she stayed with me too long. I said the wrong thing one afternoon when she came home with a new laugh I didn't recognize, and my fear put words in my mouth before my mercy could edit. She told me to trust her, and I learned how to do that all over again. Spring became summer, became an Atlanta heat wave that made the street shimmer like it was, remembering being a river. My show added a Wednesday segment called Second Light. It was not a foundation or a nonprofit, though we eventually sprouted both from the seed. It was a ritual. Survivors called in with the sentence they wish they had heard before the room got small. Elders called to place hands on heads across distance. 2 weeks in, a woman sobbed quietly on air and said she was sitting in a parking lot with the car and drive. I stopped. She whispered. I put it in park. I heard you, and I stopped. Dwayne turned his chair, so I could see his eyes do that bright thing men's eyes do when they remember their own softness. One Sunday, Nia and I drove to Tybee and let the ocean say everything twice. We said our own vows to each other on a pier that needed repainting. To knock when the other has closed a door. To leave saucers of milk for the cats of memory. To choose questions over the silence that makes villains of us. On the drive home, cicadas discussed politics with the trees, and the freeway's long ribbon unwound like grace. Months passed. The city kept dancing and dying and being born again. Nia fell in love with a woman who loved her like a lighthouse. Loves a storm by standing steady without demanding sunshine. I learned a new way to be a mother who didn't keep the house's lights on out of fear, but out of welcome. Carter became a footnote in a book we wrote to stop ourselves from slamming covers shut. The QR code from that night became a paper crane I kept in a desk drawer. I sometimes unfolded it to remind myself that the body knows where to bend. Here's what I know now in a way I didn't when a man asked me to evaporate. Disappearance is not silence. It is strategy. Sometimes a mother has to step out of the frame so a picture can be seen clearly. Sometimes the kindest thing is to take the room's air and then give it back with the windows open. Sometimes the gift is not a house or a check or a day arranged like a song. Sometimes the gift is the truth placed gently on a plate between the salad and the salmon, so nobody can pretend they didn't see it when they reach for the salt. If you are listening to this and find yourself tracing your life with a finger that never touches the page, I want you to hear me. You owe no one the smallness of yourself. Not a pastor, not a fiancé, not a woman in a mirror telling you to swallow down what makes your throat a doorbell. Don't mistake control for care. Don't confuse spectacle with love. Love doesn't hide the map. Love hands you your own compass and a full tank and 1,000 quiet mornings to practice leaving and returning and leaving again. If this story held up a mirror for you, let me know where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments. Like this, if it gave you breath. Share it with someone who keeps apologizing for their laughter. Subscribe if you want more nights like this that carry you until morning. And tell me in the comments which part made you feel most seen. We're building a porch here. There's room.